let's get started. So today we have a lineup. I'm not going to say fun.
We have a lineup.
We're going to be going into Trump's AI action plan, which is basically a document that talks about his administration's recommendations on how we can stay dominant in the AI race. Then we can go into the T app hack. So basically there was an app that allowed women to anonymously post about the guys that they've dated. And so
it's actually wild.
Yeah. And then what happened was everyone's information was stored on this like public bucket and it got leaked. So we can go into what it really means to build an app that fast. And finally, we're going to be going into the upcoming Figma IPO on the 31st. They recently raised their price target to 30 to 32, putting it at a valuation of almost 20 billion, which is originally what Adobe tried to acquire them for in 2022. And we're going to be doing a breakdown of their company and what it means for the rest of the landscape.
Yeah. So starting with Trump's AI action plan, like Maya said, he had this conference that was called Winning the AI Race. And it was so crazy because the All In podcast covered it, because I went to go do research on it and I saw their name like all over it. And I was like, I guess that makes sense because of David Sachs, but it's kind of crazy.
I went to go look at the All In podcast to like figure out what we should cover. And then I saw this like 5
episodes
on
it.
They had like 5 episodes on it.
I know.
It's honestly a really smart way to announce a policy initiative because so many people probably listen to it.
And everyone was like, it was way better than like the White House coverage of it. But basically, it's a 28-page document that has over 90 policy recommendations about how the U.S. can stay dominant. And the paper was basically broken down into 3 pillars. And so we wanted to touch on a few things from each of the pillars. But just to go over what they are, the first one was to accelerate AI innovation. The second was to build American AI infrastructure. And the last was to lead in international AI diplomacy and security. And so I feel like the theme you see across all of this is that we need to beat China. It's like one big theme. And like some of the other ones are just things you would expect. Like we need more manufacturing of semiconductors and we need to take control of the supply chain, the technology, all of those things.
Yeah. And before we get into it, actually, I think it's the first time the like president's administration has embraced AI the way Trump has. This AI action plan kind of starts as like the narrative going forward. So I think the idea is that we're expected to see more executive orders following the ideals from this action plan.
Yeah, they emphasized a lot like this has to be in the federal domain because we can't have like a patchwork of AI state laws.
Yeah. It is interesting that all of this falls under Trump. It was like something I was thinking about while I was researching, because if you think about it, like 50 to 100 years from now, this was like the first time that AI really blew up. And so obviously like the government has to take a stance on it versus Biden, who didn't have to so clearly take a stance on it. But it'll like always be associated with the Trump administration.
Yeah, I definitely agree. So within the first pillar of accelerating AI innovation, one of the big things, and there's like a bunch of things they mentioned, but one of the big things we want to talk about is they explicitly say they want to encourage open source and open weight AI. And I would say it was like relatively vague. Like it mentioned some departments that would like help with this, but it didn't actually like lay out a very clear plan.
Like I agree that there's no clear plan getting there, but they highlight a couple of the issues that are ongoing right now. So one is that companies who are seeking to use compute must sign like these long-term contracts with hyperscalers, and it's far beyond the budgetary reach of most academics and many startups. And so, for example, like AI researchers in the small university labs or startups don't have the money to pay for training costs. And so my guess is here that they're going to look towards policy to be able to reduce those costs, maybe give out federal grants. Even right now, AI training costs can now be classified as R&D expenses, which helps with your taxes, I think, and offset the cost of like the income that you're making. And so overall, while I agree with you that there's no clear plan, it's kind of just like the first time we've said as a nation that this is a priority, when China's been saying it for the last 2 years and is now ahead of the game, where all of our research labs today are using Chinese open source models.
Yeah. And in the thing, it specifically says that America needs to have the leading open models founded on American values. We had talked about the Kimi K2 model last week, and the only exception in the United States is probably Llama, which I thought was kind of interesting timing that this came out at the same time that Meta's assembling their superintelligence lab, because it does mean that there's probably going to be more eyes on Meta if they continue to make an open source model. And now they have the people to do it. So
yeah, it's also like led by Alexander Wang. And when we originally talked about that decision, we talked about how he's been very involved in AI government policy, and he's like testified in Congress, and even Mark Zuckerberg is like pretty close to the administration. And so I think like if they were to work with someone, that does make like a lot of sense.
Yeah, I was listening to the chief policy officer at Hugging Face because she did an interview after this paper came out, and she was basically talking about how the Trump administration has taken in like a ton of people's considerations, not only like the big tech players, but also Hugging Face, who like considers themselves to be a lot smaller, and a bunch of other smaller players. And that was something that they really appreciated about the AI policy, was taking them into consideration.
Yeah, the AI being built off of open source stuff was interesting. Like I feel like I was reading about that too, and it's like we wouldn't even be here if people weren't sharing their technology. Like OpenAI like built its first model on like Google's Transformers or something.
This is like pretty common in the AR VR space. Basically, there was this one company, I'm now forgetting its name. They were like the breakout company for AR VR, and they spent like $3 billion. They could never become profitable, and so they completely died as a company. And so what they ended up doing was, when they died, they open sourced all of their papers, and it's essentially like a widely accepted thing for all AR VR companies like Snap, Meta, Apple. All of those researchers are like, yeah, like a lot of the foundational stuff that we use just comes from that one company open sourcing everything. While the death of the company at that time was looked at as like, oh, we wasted these $3 billion, it actually kind of paid its dividends for the AR VR community, because it resulted in like a huge industry
Like what it is today,
of what we have today. And so like similarly in AI, this is what people expect.
Yeah. And I feel like that gets into the trade-off, like one of the trade-offs of having open source models, which is national security and just like security in general, because Dario Amodei and Anthropic's like formal position has always been that it's like very dangerous to have open source models. And so there is differing opinions in the community on whether we should or shouldn't have them.
Yeah. Oh wait, you go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say that like I think like everything that you said about like it being helpful to companies is like obviously true, and like how we would think about it. And then I think the way the Trump administration thinks about it is like open source access is like non-unique. And so like what Dario is saying like doesn't matter, because it's either going to be like China or us. And so like it can be weaponized either way then, because like even if China's open source models are like slightly behind ours for most of the like dangerous use cases, like I don't know, creating a bioweapon, they're like honestly not that much behind ours. It's more like maybe on like some like niche like benchmark, right?
I will say I agree with you for the most part, but the slight concern is like every 3 months or every 2 months, there's someone that comes out with a model that is like far better than the others, and then people kind of catch up. And so there's like these little like checks and balances that are happening. And in those 2 or 3 months, if you happen to release a model that just like crosses the line and suddenly becomes super dangerous, that's where, if that model happens to be open source, that's where it becomes dangerous, because they didn't do the due diligence when they released that model. But I agree with you the most part that the likelihood of that happening is very, very low.
But that's also like from this specific perspective, not super relevant, right? Because like the US probably, I feel like, won't open source their like most cutting edge model. Like they'll probably keep it internal at first.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
It's so funny because like OpenAI literally was talking about how they treat their weights. They were like, oh, you have to double authenticate it, and they have all of these like million safety precautions. And Trump was like, no, I think you guys should just all open source everything.
I guess my biggest question out of this, and I'm curious like how you guys thought about it, is like why who owns the open source stack like matters, especially like if you can like locally download it as well, right? Like how does it matter if it's like China versus us? And I think like what the conclusion I came to is like there's some things that like kind of matter, which is like if it's China's models, then it'll have like China's like cultural flair of like not talking about certain things, and like we can't control its like freedom of speech, things like that. And then there's like a bigger piece of the pie that's like our models are more compatible with like our overall AI ecosystem of like NVIDIA GPUs, like AWS, like all these other things. And so it just has like a exponential effect where like even if we're not making money off of it because it's open source, or even if we're not getting like data from it because it's locally run, we're still going to get like other, like they're still going to be dependent on our ecosystem. But also like a lot of people probably won't locally run it as well.
But you can use anything to host them. Like even if like you don't need to use like AWS, for example.
That was what I thought going into it, but like at least like my takeaway is like because it's like more compatible, I guess.
I would probably still think that like the American values piece of it is like
bigger.
more important. Yeah. Like I think that it's clearly really important to them, like geopolitically, that we have the strongest model and that it's like based on these like American values. And I do think that like that will end up being more important than like the tech stack component of it.
I guess like I think those are important parts of the conversation, but I think the most important part of the conversation is the fact that like all of our research today is happening on Qwen, which is like Alibaba's like open source models. I read this like stack or like this Quora stack where someone was like, why does everyone use Qwen in the research community? And someone says, we tuned Qwen 2.5 7B in our paper. General choice reasons is that for their size, it has strong multilingual support. 7B variant is good for restricted compute resources while being smart enough for tasks. There are no unexpected tricks from the Qwen team, and models are not overly tuned on some like style emojis in the response. So it's like generally just like this very vanilla model that's like good enough for research papers where like the model, like having access to the cutting edge model is not necessary for the type of research that they're doing. And I think that's the point that like the administration that the administration doesn't like, is that all of American cutting edge research is being done on these like Chinese open source models. I think, yeah, sure, they care about American values, but I think they want the research community on our models.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah.
The other thing is that without having open source models, I think the administration in the paper kind of alludes to the fact that like there's going to be an imbalance economically in the nation, where a few companies have a lot of power and then everyone else doesn't. And so I think that they're actually worried about that as well, where the American economy is at stake here, where if there is an imbalance in power, the like classic ideal of the American dream of anyone being able to move within classes diminish. And so to that, like I do applaud the administration for like pointing to that in their paper. But
yeah, I also think it's like everything just stays a GPT wrapper if everything's like closed source, because you're just like,
because you have like 2 people or 3 people. You have like Anthropic, OpenAI, and Meta, and then like anything else
and,
is
like,
not
you just
a foundational
are like
model.
completely dependent on like their pricing and like their data sharing laws.
Yeah.
Like I feel like right now companies are kind of like, we have no choice but to like accept whatever the data sharing is or isn't.
True, but also that means like every company would have to invest in a team of researchers. That doesn't like really necessarily make sense to do.
No, I don't think every company will. I'm just saying like I think it's tough for like the AI company ecosystem to develop long term with like every company as a GPT wrapper besides like 3 or 4 frontier models.
No, I mean, I see what you're saying. And into the data sharing conversation, like a lot of people are mad at Mark Zuckerberg for taking privacy away from the individual American, because like everyone was like kind of dependent on social media or Instagram and Facebook. And so like it's honestly like a similar conversation where if you're all dependent on the same closed models, like you said, you have no right over your data. By wanting things to be open source, you can see this proactive action by the administration of commenting on your data, of like not being locked into a certain provider.
Well, we'll see if people actually do it. It's an encouragement.
The next thing in Pillar 1 that I wanted to talk about was that there was a section around ensuring frontier AI protects free speech and American values. I thought this one was pretty interesting. So the 2 things that it talks about is that the government should only contract with frontier large language model developers who ensure that their systems are objective and free from top-down ideological bias and designed to pursue objective truth. And so some liberals are saying that this is actually like going against the First Amendment. It's alluding to the fact that when government contracts are being made with AI model providers, they're going to start being evaluated on their like political ideals, which like is the first time we're seeing this be a conversation within government contracts, because there's a part of it that says, okay, this is against like freedom of speech.
Well, I don't think it's against freedom of speech. Like I see what you're saying, but like I think it's like whether you say it explicitly or not, it's like always true. Yeah. Right? Like for example, like if Biden's administration was around, I can like bet a lot of money that they're not going to contract with like Grok when it's calling itself Hitler. Yeah. And like that's from an ideals perspective not any different, right? Like you're selecting what model you work with based on its like ideology. Mm-hmm. It's just that like when Trump says these things and uses like very vague, seemingly like acceptable things, like, oh, it should seek like objective truth, like we know what that means for them, which is that like that group of people has been like pissed that like models haven't emerged, like model personalities have emerged as like pretty liberal, and I think they're upset about that. And like I don't know if it was in this announcement or something else, but like people in the administration have definitely talked about how they don't want AI to like promote like DEI or like any of these things that they've like banned per se.
Yeah. I mean, in the actual thing, it says they're going to revisit the NIST AI risk management framework to eliminate references to misinformation, DEI, and climate change.
So it was from,
Yeah. And I mean, I get it from the conservatives' perspective of saying like we don't want like quote unquote woke AI in our government. And I agree with you that like any administration is just going to pick the AI that reflects their ideals. But it's kind of crazy to me because it's like that is like contributing to people having less of their opinions because like whatever administration gets to pick the model first, what if that's like a super sticky choice? And then that is like that model is like reflective of that administration's ideals going forward.
Like
I mean,
the model that's used in the government, or which model?
Yeah, like in the extreme case, like if you pick a model during a certain administration and that's reflected of that ideals and that is used in the government going forward, does that disseminate its beliefs into the rest of the government more strongly than we've had before?
And I think it's like even more sinister than that, where there's like a ripple effect where like every single model player is going to like have a conversation about this and then be like really specific and like making sure they fine tune their models to like not be too liberal probably, or just like have it in their head that like we're not going to get government contracts
if we
like,
don't
if we don't like test for these things and like figure it out. So yeah, I think it's like one of those things where like there's no such thing in life as like unbiased, right? Like everything's gonna have a bias, but like more or less like I feel like AI has been like kind of out of the box when it comes to like its political opinions, and like Trump wanting to shape that is really unfortunate because like I don't think anyone else would have tried to shape that or like be a part of the conversation.
Yeah, so I think one, there's that conversation, and then two, we still haven't figured out how to do it though, which is like you said, AI has been like grown. Like for example, when Elon tries to make Grok less woke or whatever, he ends up making Grok mecha Hitler.
Yeah.
Right. And so we ourselves have not figured out how to actually manipulate the AI to reflect our own beliefs. In the future vision of the world, like you probably are allowed to buy the AI that reflects your beliefs. But then there's another conversation of like what models does the government choose, and how much of a power do they have?
Yeah, well, I also think it's just like there's like many examples of Trump's administration being like against free speech, whether it's like on college campuses, people protesting in favor of Palestine, whether it's like the way that his press secretary handles her briefings, which is like very unconventional, like all these things, right? So it's like obviously scary in that sense, where it's like you haven't protected. It's like I don't even think that what's written in this document doesn't protect the First Amendment. It's just like in general they don't. So then like you're not taking this document in like good faith.
Yeah. I just find it funny that like they like within the first page they try to say we're going to support AI that's free from ideological bias, when like any written communication has like some bias to it.
Yeah. Well, this is just like what the conservatives have like always said that like makes no sense. Like they'll always talk about like college campuses or like anything and be like it's biased, and it's like you're biased too. Like I don't really know.
Everything's biased.
Yeah.
My last thing is like I think that the two connect. Like I also thought that thing about ideology was interesting, and I think that that's like also part of why open source is important to them, because like that is a way to like disseminate their ideology internationally.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And then the second pillar is about American AI infrastructure, which is like what AI will be built on, which is equally important. And also I feel like a place where the government has more of a role, since like infrastructure is like what they do.
Yeah, the first thing we wanted to talk about was developing the grid to match the pace of AI innovation. And we've talked about this in the past, but basically the grid in the United States is extremely unstable, and it's been a barrier in general to AI, because like we do need to be concerned about our grid capacity. It's what fundamentally like powers all of AI, because you need to run like high levels of compute that we've seen. And so you need a strong grid to go along with that.
Yeah. And so what they're going to try to help with is fast track data center construction by granting new exclusions under the National Environment Policy Act. They're going to help streamline permits under the Clean Water Act and encourage the use of federal lands also to build data centers. So basically we've seen a complete flip from the Biden administration, which is like hey, don't worry about the environment, don't worry about the water, don't worry about the federal lands. We can use all of these resources to actually help the AI race.
Yeah. And like data centers are like one thing, but like you still need the grid to support the data centers. And so it's like if you're building all of these data centers, and I saw that like demand I think had tripled between 2014 and 2023, which came out of like a study out of this lab in Berkeley. And if we're going to continue to build these data centers, like Maya was saying, supported by the government, also supported by like Meta, Tesla, like all of these companies, then like we need the infrastructure. Basically, current capacity of our grid like will not meet the demand. So like there is a cutoff at which point like we will not be able to support power to these data centers. And so like we need to do something about it. Also because like China's grid is 2 to 3x the size of the US grid. And that's like putting aside the fact that they also have like way more clean energy and all of that. If you just look at like the raw amount of power that they generate, it's like way more than the US.
Is China having more power like accounting for the fact that they also like 4x our population or 3?
Yeah, like even when you take all of that into account, like they still have way more power than us.
How do we not use like more power than China on a per person basis when like so many of them live in like
They have like
rural
huge
area?
manufacturing facilities.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I think what it's doing is signaling to the people in AI infrastructure construction of the world to be like, yeah, go and start your plans in this direction. We will likely pass policy. In order to accelerate it, you need to like kind of signal to the rest of the industry of like, yes, we're going to let you do this. So like, okay, go hire the folks to go start the plans. And so I think they're parallelizing that in a way.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. I feel like it's the same thing that we see happening in San Francisco. Like so many people don't want to buy old properties because you have to go through the city and like pass all of these plans, and there's so much red tape, and that's just like an annoying process. And you see with like a new mayor in the city, for example, all of that like goes away. And so people are more likely to like buy up the land and actually make those plans. And I think that also like ties to the next point we wanted to talk about, which is training a skilled workforce in AI infrastructure. Because like to Maya's point of like making the plans, you also need the people that are gonna build this and also maintain anything that you build, whether that's like the electric grid or if it's the data centers. Like you need the people for that. And we've seen Trump encourage vocational training throughout his administration. It's always been something that he's talked about, but he even like more explicitly calls it out in this section.
Yeah, he wants it to make it be the new blue collar work for the American society. And he quote unquote says AI infrastructure build out will create high paying jobs for American workers. And a large part of the plan is that he's trying to show that AI is not going to replace jobs, but it's going to improve American lives and it's going to complement them.
Yeah. Well, I think that as a government, like there's two sides of the argument, right? It's like, oh, like AI will create net more jobs versus like it won't. And like intellectuals will like go back and forth on it and be like, is this the time technology like actually does something different? But like as a government, like you're always going to take the side of like it'll create new jobs because that's just like what creates stability for you. They like really emphasize like American workers. We don't need like undocumented immigrants. Like again and again, they were like, oh, like the liberals told you that like undocumented immigrants are doing the job no one wants to do, and like we've deported so many of them, and like the economy hasn't collapsed. Which honestly, like that on it didn't make sense because like I don't think we've probably deported a substantial amount of the ones that are here, because then they were like, and we're sorry we haven't deported more. And it is like really interesting to hear them talk to their own base because they were like apologizing for like not doing enough. But yeah, I think like to a certain level it is obviously good that they're trying to like upskill people. And like some of the jobs they're talking about, like I know one of the companies was like a like AI native like factory where like a lot of things were automated, and they're like, we can take people like post military or like post school instead of going to college, which makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And yeah, like the jobs are like HVAC people or like plumbing or pipe fitting. Like it's jobs like that they need. And it was interesting because like this was one of the longest sections in the entire paper. Like there were 6 policy recommendations and each of them were really long. So it was interesting that they like spent so much time on it. And in the policy, they basically were like, we're going to come up with a plan to the plan, like figure out who the most important people are, then go and develop a curriculum for them, then go like feed this to like community colleges and like other institutions and basically have this like whole plan for training. So I feel like it's definitely a ways out. But it's also interesting because the people that are going to need this the most are most likely private companies. And so that was another part of the policy where they specifically said they were going to work with private companies and do partnerships to help fund all of this training.
Yeah. A frustrating part about this section, though, I felt was that they always talk about like the blue collar base, but not about the white collar base, and specifically with regards to like legalized and documented immigration. So as we know, all the top AI researchers that are getting poached right now between like Meta and OpenAI and Anthropic are obviously very smart, but they all come from like non-American
They're all like immigrants,
universities.
yeah.
They're all immigrants. And so I think there's like a need for a call to action of like, hey, how do we legalize immigration to the US? It's the same conversation that we've always had, where it's like the H-1B pipeline is oversubscribed and we don't have an easy way to bring educated immigrants to this country easily in large masses when there's clearly interest. Even when the top AI researchers are the reasons why America is doing so well in the AI race in the first place. And so, yes, I appreciate the focus on the blue collar base, but I'm frustrated by the lack of commentary on the educated, legalized immigration base. And so obviously I expected this from the administration, but I think it's worth calling out.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, when we posted our TikTok of like all of the AI talent swaps, someone was literally like, why are they all Asian? And I was like, what do you mean? Yeah, I honestly, like what you just said, Maya, made me think of another thing, which is like, it doesn't address like white collar jobs either. They're thinking about it from a perspective of like making the US like the frontier of AI, in which case like it's most important to upskill blue collar workers to like work in data centers and stuff, but that doesn't actually address like the potential mass job loss.
Yeah. And it's interesting because Sam Altman also talked about it like the exact same day that Trump was talking about this at like the Fed conference. And he was basically saying that like there is going to be mass displacement. And so like we really need to be thinking about how we're going to retrain our existing workforce. Like retrain our existing workforce and change education to address the fact that like there is going to be like a large chunk of jobs where AI can outperform you and you are going to get replaced. And like that's like all white collar jobs. Sam Altman seemed really scared. I don't know if you guys watched the clips.
I did.
It was crazy.
I did, but I like, again, when it comes to like Sam Altman or like the CEO of Anthropic, whatever, like talking about how AI is going to do X, Y, Z, I tend to not like listen because I think that they're a super biased source. Like to them, it's in their best interest.
In so many ways.
Yeah, like it's in their best interest to say that because then it creates the like, oh, it creates the idea that, oh, OpenAI is truly going to reach AGI or ASI, which is what they want everyone to think, because that puts more funding in their pockets. And that's how they keep the company going.
No, that's true. But I feel like I've never heard Sam Altman be so concerned about like kids before. Like he was so worried about like mental health.
It's also just like, why are you like talking about all the concerns about AI,
the thing that
like
you
you're
built.
not creating? It's literally like a Frankenstein situation. Like, hello.
Yeah, like he was just like, because it was the whole like therapy thing, because like it's become like the number one source, and he was basically like kids and teenagers are like in trouble basically.
I agree on the social level of like it could make us more lonely, it could lead to the loneliness epidemic, and I think that call to action is like to parents to make sure that they're being smart with their kids having access to technology, which is always good, right? Which is like similar to like when social media came out of like, hey, don't give this to your kids. But on the flip side, where like he is like warning about AI of the thing that he's building, but I think that makes sense because it's like anytime you build something really, really cool, you're gonna be like, oh, this is gonna take over the world, or this is gonna like like you almost want to scare people into thinking that you're cooler than you are. But yeah, because it's just because like if you read a lot of AI researchers' blogs, they don't really believe in the future of ASI existing near term.
Yeah. Going on to the third pillar, which is about leading in international AI diplomacy and security. I feel like this pillar mostly expands on what we talked about in the first pillar, which is that like the US wants to like control the like AI stack basically.
They talked about this idea of like the AI tech stack. So it's like a fully deployable stack that has like the model, the ability to like train the model further, the ability to interact with it, and also like the GPUs and host it yourself. And they want to be able to deploy this to like other nations and essentially work with any other nation to to build anything in AI except for China. Like they specifically call out that they're like competing against China.
They really hate China.
And what they're trying to do is encourage nations to build their digital economies on the American technology stack. And so creating like this dependency on America so that we are like number one in the forefront and like we get also all the economic benefits if everyone needs to use our stack, and the stack is like very hard to recreate themselves. Which I thought was like kind of interesting. I mean, I think we're like already doing that to an extent with NVIDIA. No one's been able to replicate the performance of NVIDIA's GPUs, and even if they do.
It's 8 o'clock, guys. The music turned on.
Yeah. So what was I saying? Oh, yeah. There's very few competitors that can match the performance of NVIDIA's GPUs. In the last episode, we talked about how Huawei's currently trying to compete with NVIDIA's H20s and is like in somewhat a competitive place with them. But the one thing that they're still not able to compete on is like the CUDA platform, which is like the software on top of the GPU, because a lot of like libraries and developer tooling is built on the CUDA platform. And so to build this on a different platform built by a different company is like going to be pretty hard. So there is already a huge dependence on NVIDIA. And I think in this policy recommendation, I think it's, how do you explain it? Like, I think it's just a nod to NVIDIA of what NVIDIA is already doing and like supporting them rolling out the H20 that we talked about last week. And then also supporting future NVIDIAs of the world or any competitors to NVIDIA if they want to go after that as well.
Did you see Trump talk about Jensen in the All-In? Oh my God, it was literally so funny. He was like, everyone told me I needed to meet Jensen Huang. Then I met Jensen Huang and I saw why I needed to meet him. And then like the camera pans to Jensen like front row at this conference. It was so funny.
Wait, there's like other times it's been funny too. Like in another one, he was like, and Jensen Huang, I know you're out there in the audience. And then he's like, Mark Zuckerberg? I don't think he's here, but Jensen.
No, he talks to Jensen all the time in his sweet speech, and it's like so funny. It's kind of cute.
Jensen definitely like did something. I don't know what he did.
Jensen just like explained AI infrastructure to him.
Yeah.
Wait, I don't think so. I feel like Trump not sending AI chips to China is like the most Trump thing, and I have no idea how Jensen got him to reverse that.
Well, it was the rare earth deal.
I don't think it's like any witchcraft. Like I think NVIDIA, I think Jensen specifically just like talked some sense into him. Like, hey, Huawei's competing with us now. If you want us to still make money and run your entire stock market, like let us go back there.
Yeah. Let's get back in the game.
Well, I think like NVIDIA is like a huge pillar of all of the indexes right now.
No, you're right.
They're the one reason why they're probably, in my opinion,
the market's roring.
The market is roaring because of them, right? They're the thing that is holding up the American economy. Like, let's just be real about this. So Jensen has the power to be like, yo, Trump, like you might think Elon's like the coolest person in the world. Guess what? If you look at the stock market, it's actually me.
Yeah.
Which I would agree with. Like, I think Jensen is more powerful than Elon.
Yeah.
I just think
Yeah. It's also like Elon's hatching a master plan that's gonna take like 10 years to play out, versus like Jensen Huang's important like right now.
Yeah. Did you also see the call out when Trump was like referring to all the All-In guys and like thanking them for having him on, and then he like called out Jason and was like, yeah, like I know you don't like me, but like thanks for having me or something. It was like honestly so insane.
Wait, honestly, a lot of the interactions were like really funny. Like
you should watch it, Maya. Like you should just watch it on 2X because it's like so funny.
When they had like JD Vance on, I don't know who it was, but like two of them were like, yeah, like I know we really disagree, but like happy to have you here.
Yeah. And then pillar 3 is also where they touch on security, which I think is something that like everyone realized was pretty noticeably missing, and we were clearly pushing opportunity and like innovation over security and like the entire rest of the paper. But they do touch on like 2 things. One being that we want to ensure the US government is at the forefront of evaluating national security, and then also investing in biosecurity.
I think they were specifically silent on mentioning AGI or ASI in the paper. I think this is their like one nod to it, of saying like, yeah, this thing that people are talking about could result in these actions, which is like the bioweapons.
Yeah.
And so like therefore we're going to prevent against this like future doom of the world, similar to like the nuclear race. But they didn't like specifically say, hey, like AGI or ASI is going to get us there. So I thought it was interesting the way they like tiptoed around it.
Yeah. It's also something that like we already can do today, because like a few years ago in 2023 there was a red teaming experiment between like OpenAI, MIT, and Stanford, where students had to use GPT-4 to plan a biological like weapons attack basically, and like see if they could do it using GPT-4. And the TLDR is they could. It was people that have like no experience in any of this. They're not even like biology majors, and it basically told them how to create the 1918 flu, make a nerve agent, which chemicals to get, and like which lab equipment to buy, and then where to get it from, like which labs to get it from, and step-by-step instructions on how to make it. And so after all of that, it's kind of like unclear what they did. They said they like strengthened security precautions, but like these models are definitely capable of doing things like this. I also think that's why like OpenAI has increased like their preparedness framework to a higher level, because it's clear that like at some point you can't avoid it. Like you're going to be able to get that type of information and not be able to protect against it. And so I think it's important that they call it out.
I guess the AI overlords just like decided that like a bioweapon is going to be like what takes us all out.
Yeah, I actually like looked into why it was a bioweapon, because I was curious, because I was like, why is that
They
the Stanford?
always say that,
yeah, and apparently it's been that way for like years and years, like 50 plus years. And it was like something that was established, I think, in like the 70s or 80s. And it's basically because it's the only thing that everyone agrees on is like bad. It's called like dual use technology, because on like one hand, it's really good if you can get like vaccines and like cures to diseases and all of those things. So like you want to be able to get those insights out of the model, but you somehow need to like draw the line when it becomes a bioweapon. And a bioweapon is something that like universally everyone agrees is bad and illegal. And so it's like a benchmark that no one will ever disagree on.
Maybe it's also just like if you're like a non-state actor, that is like your lowest effort way to cause maximum harm, because like you can't like build a nuke or something.
Yeah. And it's like pretty difficult to detect, which is like specifically what the AI action plan calls out, is like, let's say you're getting these different agents from like all these different labs, like it'd be pretty hard to put it together of like what you're trying to build. And so something that we have today in the United States is like nucleic acid sequence screening, which basically means that like anytime you ask for a gene sequence from a lab, they basically can run this test to see if it's flagged for like matching any known toxic genes or like pathogens or anything that like could be used to create something like bad. And so it's not a mandate today, and it's like nothing that the US regulates, but it's something that labs can choose to do just to like protect themselves. And so as part of the AI action plan, they were basically saying that this is going to become a mandatory practice in the United States, where anytime someone requests like gene sequences, you like need to run this screening not only on like what they're asking for, but also on the person. So it's interesting because it's kind of like a background check, like the way it's debated on for guns, but with like this.
Yeah, I mean, I was gonna say it's also like similar to like fintech apps, where like in order to send money to any like account, you have to run like what it's called a no fact check, and it's just to make sure that there's like no money laundering practices. It kind of makes sense, where it's just like to get access to XYZ technology, you have to be screened to a certain extent to make sure you're not like a bad actor, which I don't think is like anything net new. We're just applying it to AI. Like if you want a GPT account, like show your face, you know.
Well, on that note,
brings us to the T-app hack.
Yeah.
There was this T-app hack. So if you haven't heard of the T-app, it basically lets women anonymously post comments about guys they've dated, and it literally became like the #1 app on the App Store above chat, which is insane. And then it got hacked, and basically everyone's information is everywhere, including 13,000 selfies and photo IDs submitted for account verification, and 59,000 images from like posts, comments, and direct messages.
Yeah, and the reason why everyone has this photo verification is because like part of the app was it only allows women on it. So, because I literally tried to sign up for the app in order to make a TikTok about it. And so I like took a photo of myself, and it literally was so unflattering. Like I feel like whenever like you have to take a photo in the moment, you know, it like always looks bad.
Like it ops you.
Yeah. And it literally looks so, I looked so ugly that I retook the photo. And in that moment, I'm not even kidding, I thought to myself, and I was like, why did I just retake that? Like, no one's ever going to see that photo. But no one is ever going to see that photo because they only leaked like prior to I think like February 2024 photos. I didn't realize at first that like this app came out in 2023, but it was in 1 week, like basically in July, that it became like very viral.
Yeah, so basically they used Google's Firebase platform with a public storage bucket. And so the platform is like, essentially Firebase is just like a platform where you can deploy your apps and use different storage options to store the data from whatever you're using in your app. And so yeah, buckets are a way to store data. And so they were storing like just large amounts of user data on there.
I wouldn't even like honestly call it a hack. Like maybe it's a breach. I don't know like what you would call it, but it's honestly just like having really poor security. And a lot of people online have just been like, yeah, it's like pretty negligent of them to like have this bucket publicly available to anyone. Cause like basically the way you could access it, if you just like think about it in terms of like something most people would know, it's like if you go and do like inspect element on like any web page, you have like the network tab, and in that network tab there's like URLs that things direct to, and usually you like make sure they're like hidden or encrypted or like whatever it might be, like whatever security protection you're using. But in this case, like that URL was just like public and you could just copy and paste it directly into like the thing. So it's like super easy, like any of us could have done it too.
Well, it's not like uncommon for like a URL like that to be public, but then like that bucket has permissioning set up. So you have to like have like basically a key to get into the bucket. And like that was also the second layer of concern, is that people could get into the bucket without any sort of permissioning.
And apparently their API in general is weak, and there's like a way to say like private messages and stuff as well in addition to all of this.
Oh my god, really?
Yeah,
that's crazy.
And then in addition to all of that, they like clearly say when you take the photo that it like gets deleted and that they don't store any of your information, which companies lie about all the time, but I guess like usually you don't get caught lying about it.
Yeah, and I was curious if it's illegal that this happened, you know?
I feel like it is illegal because they said they delete your information, like at least in California. Like I'm pretty sure California has like decent laws around like your right to have a company delete your information.
Yeah,
and like you
I think
definitely
it's the California
can't.
Consumer Privacy Act.
It is. Also, okay, the other reason why I think they could get sued is because once they downloaded all the photos, they started like rating people and like making sites where you like swipe like Tinder and like giving like the girls like ELO scores. And like some of the things that they discovered, because like I feel like at that point when things go viral, people just do like the deepest dives, and they found like government IDs of people, so they were like doxing where they work, and they found a secret US naval base that's not public information, because like a girl at the naval base like that works in the art military like took her verification photo on the base, and for some reason all the photos have like geolocation data.
Because don't they add like a little pin of you?
No, someone like the map you're talking about with the pin of everyone was like created by someone post the hack to like dox where everyone lives.
I didn't even
like
know
the
that.
app doesn't give a fuck where you live. Like someone went and created that map, and then was like, someone else was like, oh, like looking at this map, I just found a secret military base.
That's insane.
It's literally the same as like when Strava, I'm pretty sure it was Strava or like Apple Fitness trackers, like people in the military like didn't have their location data off and it was public, and someone like found a US military base like via a running app.
Gen Z is so unserious.
I know.
That's actually so funny.
Wow. I was like, that's actually crazy. Yeah, and then everyone was talking about like how this shows like the harms of vibe coded apps, and like I saw someone ask Grok like, do your best analysis on the probability it's vibe coded, and it said 85%. I do wonder, like, knowing that it is a couple years old as an app, like, if it was, like, originally just, like, created and then they've been, like, vibe coding, like, additions to it.
Yeah, I would say, like, vibe coding isn't really, it's, like, this idea that you're, like, not really paying attention to, like, what you're writing. But in general, it's just, like, the act of using an LLM while you're coding. And what it does is it brings you further away from the code. Like, I was watching this one guy on a podcast who develops, like, the Linux system, which if you don't know is like the core operating system to Mac. So anyways, he obviously, if you like build an operating system, you're like really fucking smart. And so like he like talked about how he doesn't use LLMs because he feels like he's like not learning. He was just like, I just truly didn't have a understanding of like what I'm writing, which I think even prior to vibe coding was like somewhat of a thing. Because for example, I remember like when I first started working at my job before LLMs were really good at like coding, I would just like find snippets online, put them in and be like, okay, yeah, this like works. And then like hopefully someone can like review it. Yeah. So I don't think it's like anything net new of like not understanding what your code is. It just makes it easier.
It's the same as like reading the like Snoop's summary of the book instead of like reading it in English. It's like any shortcut you take in like any.
But I think it's like a worse shortcut for sure. Because I feel like I did what you're talking about like all of college, and it was like, yes, you have to like still understand how to put the pieces together and how like everything works, and you kind of have to like spot check it. Like there's a human in the loop. I feel like with LLMs, you don't need a human in the loop.
No, you definitely do.
I think that it's like more that you can't prompt corrections before.
Yeah, that's true.
I think that's like the key difference. Like even when I think about like Excel, like I would obviously Google like what I needed for Excel, and that's like a coding language in a way.
Yeah.
And I would find things, but they wouldn't work. Like sometimes I make a SQL query and it doesn't work, and then I literally just like in natural language I'm like, this is what's wrong, like fix it.
And it does.
But I could never do that before.
Yeah.
I mean, it's enabling the shortcut further.
But it's also like
But you don't need to get it. Like it's like before you needed to get it. Like if I didn't understand the formula I found online at all, I couldn't figure out how to fix it. So I had to also learn. It's a difference between learning and not.
Yeah. But I think like, I mean, I don't know, not to like take the extremist sense, but it's like, I don't need to know how to build a house.
Well, that's a whole different conversation. Like then you're arguing like, do people need to know how to code or not? I think it's more like in the interim where like it's not perfect. When people like don't understand, like in this situation. But I get what you're saying, I guess, like zooming out, which is that like the problem isn't necessarily vibe coding. It's that like because of vibe coding, a lot of people that don't understand code are creating apps. So then they're weak apps.
Yeah. Also, I just have a general optimism with AI. I think we'll see a course correction where the bar to sign up for an app or use an app will become higher for consumers over time.
I agree.
Right? So like we're seeing this like middle ground area where the early adopters of AI who are creating these apps, like they're exploding in ARR and number of users like exponentially. But we also see super high churn because the bar of those apps are quite low. You realize, oh, it can do like 2 or 3 things really, really well, but doesn't actually solve my full need.
Yeah, it's all like hype. It's also social media. It's all just a cycle because like things will get so big for like 2 days and then it'll just like go away. And I feel like we saw things start to transition towards this with like Be Real. Like I feel like you had like Snapchat, for example, or like Instagram or apps like that, where it was like you had super sticky user bases for like a really long time. And then we saw other social media apps pop up like Locket, for example, or Be Real or things like that, where I would say like they had pretty good adoption and like people honestly used it for like a pretty long time. And now we're seeing like that cycle decrease more and more as like these random new apps come up, and it's like someone will try it for a day or two, sign up, and then they're like, never mind, I don't want to use it anymore. And I'm sure like to Maya's point, at some point we'll like course correct back to like where we were before.
Anyways, speaking of user retention, we can go on to Figma's IPO. Figma is known for having insane user retention rates. I thought we could weave in our normal segment, which is, would Figma get our check for the IPO? AKA, like, would you invest in the IPO like prior? Personally, yes, but we can go into the story.
Yeah, I also would. But basically, Figma's IPO target price just increased almost 20%. From $25 to $30, and that puts them at a $19 billion valuation, similar to what Adobe tried to acquire them for in 2022. And part of this is like Figma since then has been growing a ton. Like their Q1 2025 revenue was like $228 million, and that was a 46% year over year growth, which I feel like is a really good growth rate for a company that big.
That size, yeah, for sure.
Well, apparently, I read the stat, but if they do IPO, which they will, and on the 31st, no SaaS in the public market is growing faster than Figma.
Yeah. Oh, that's crazy.
Yeah.
No, it is very impressive.
And so normal SaaS companies trade at 8.6x expected value to ARR ratio, and we expect Figma to trade closer to 20 to 30x their expected value, kind of in line with other high growth startups like CrowdStrike and Cloudflare and other SaaS companies. And the reason why we compare them to SaaS is because they have just essentially a really high gross margin. Like when you're looking at the gross margin, the cost that you take out is basically your like software cost, which essentially is like your cloud costs you have to run your servers and like run the data and store the data. The rest of your revenue then goes to paying out your employees and stuff like that. And so traditionally SaaS companies have like really high trading multiples because their margins are very high and specifically I think Figma's is at 91%.
Yeah, we also haven't seen a lot of like super AI enabled companies IPO yet, and people are kind of putting this in that category. And I know like Canva and Databricks are some other companies that are looking to IPO as well and like kind of follow in Figma's footsteps. And so although we have seen like the IPO landscape open up and we're seeing more and more companies IPO, I think as they continue to grow, like they are starting to set precedents for each other, and people are looking to them of like, how much could I realistically get in this market? And Figma's like a solid person to like be one of the leaders in that to IPO.
Yeah. The other thing I was going to say is I wanted to talk about their stickiness a little bit more. So they have 132% net dollar retention, which basically means they're getting the same money from their customers every year plus 32%. So they're growing with their customers growing. Mm-hmm. So the way you can imagine this is that they like sign up a small startup with like one designer, and then that turns into 3 designers, and then that turns into 9 designers. They have a near monopolistic position with over 80% market share and specifically product design. And now they're basically trying to be a part of the entire like ideate to ship like stack. And so they like are encroaching into Figma slides. They're encroaching into like dev mode, which is like essentially being able to like translate the designs really easily into code. They're encroaching into like FigJam, which is kind of like this like whiteboardy type of solution. And
FigJam is my favorite.
Oh, I don't really like
it. It's the only product I understand. Like, I feel like I can't use Figma because it's too complicated for me.
Yeah.
But I only use FigJam.
Yeah, I mean,
FigJam is really easy to use.
I can only read Figma. I also like, but I can't write.
That's just looking at it.
I mean, that's all you need to know, really.
I guess, yeah. No, yeah, that makes sense.
But that's like the same as a screenshot at that rate.
Our company like controls our Figma seats like really aggressively. If I'm not working on a project like where I'm not the actual coder, they take my dev access away.
Oh,
which is so funny because like normally dev access is like pretty easy to get. Yeah, because like in dev access mode, like you can just like read the components a little bit better, but you
that makes sense.
But you can't like actually edit them. But they'll take that away from me, and I'm like, really and then I'm like, but I need it. And they're like, no, you're not actually writing the code. You're just pushing the product through. And I was like, I guess you're right.
Yeah. But I feel like the complexity is something I wanted to talk about. And I guess it like relates back to like the same conversation we were having before of like, if roles are going to consolidate, someone like me who they expect to be a designer, like I can't use Figma, and I'm not going to learn how to use Figma because there's other tools available to me that are a lot easier to use. I'm just like kind of curious over time. Like I don't think design's going away. I think like Figma's an amazing product, and they've like built out like a fundamental product that is way better than any other design solution out there, and like basically have a monopoly. But like as like the general landscape of roles change, I'd be curious to see like if designers end up being like design engineers or like design PMs, like you start having like multiple roles, and then you don't need to be like as deep and specialized in design to warrant a tool like Figma.
I do think like your company is like way more encouraging of that type of thing. Like I don't feel like it's going to be a long time and they have like more than enough time to evolve.
What I see in their future is that it like pops, like the IPO does really well. It's like whatever 100x, 200x that we see. I mean, like Circle got like 700x.
No, I feel like it'll do really well.
And then we'll see obviously the drop as people start to sell off, and then we'll see probably a couple years of people being like, Figma's gonna have an impending doom because there's like XYZ new app that came out that like makes you design your apps like a lot easier via AI in some way. We'll like see something like that, and then Figma will like slowly creep up because like people will realize that their user retention is like still such a big deal, and that they have like enough time to change the narrative. Kind of similar to Google in that way, where it's like people were like very anti-Google a couple years ago, and then they dropped Gemini out of nowhere and it was like fine. Or like honestly similar to Robinhood in a way, where people were like, yeah, Robinhood's like never gonna go anywhere. They're never gonna like get outside of the like quote unquote like meme trading kind of vibe. But personally, I will not be holding Figma for very long.
I feel like the difference is that like Figma is already an established player. Like I feel like Robinhood had a lot more to prove.
Yeah, I was gonna.
Yeah, they didn't have dominance over the market share.
But I
Figma
think
does.
Robinhood's a bad example. What company was your first example?
Google. Yeah,
I think Google is
a better example. It's a better
example.
one. Yeah.
Like the reason why I think Robinhood's a bad example is because Robinhood is an example of people not thinking a company will do well because they don't think that the legacy players in like banking can be like
taken
out.
Yeah.
Versus like Figma is the opposite, where like we're saying like they're facing a threat from next generation players, which is like probably so funny to everyone at Figma, where like for like most of the life of the company, everyone's obviously been talking about like them competing with Adobe, which is like the legacy player. I think like company cycles have just like kind of gotten faster. Like it's still a pre-IPO company and its threats are like startups, not like the legacy player in the space.
Yeah.
Like I feel like that is like the weird thing.
Yeah.
Their chief product officer is sick though, so I believe in him.
Yeah.
Wait, so would it get all of our checks or not you, Priya?
It would get my check right now, assuming I could get out of
how,
it.
It is like how we met, but
Yeah.
It is how we met. It is how we met.
I was gonna
it's
say
like such a cute story.
I know.
I was gonna say it'll get my check now, and then again in 2 years.
I was reading in the Robinhood terms when I like put my buy in, and it was like, if you sell this in like under 30 days, we're gonna label you a flipper and limit your future
Does
access.
it buy at open? What does it do?
It buys at open if you get allocated shares.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
like probably I won't, but
If you did.
but if I do.
Yeah. I was arguing with a couple of my friends, and I was saying that like we should like how much to put in, and I was like, oh, like maybe like 10 bands, 20 bands, and they were like, oh my god, like you want to stay in Figma for that long? And I was like, no, like I'm gonna sell within like a month for sure.
I heard about this.
And then they were like, no, but cap gains, dog. And I was like, what do you mean cap gains? It doesn't like tax rate doesn't matter if you're making like 200 300x on the IPO, which like by the way I might not make, right? Like you never know. Like this could go this is not financial advice. This could go totally wrong. But anyways, we were arguing, and I was like, you're literally arguing over a 10% tax rate to like hold through like for 3 years, right? I was like, no, I'm gonna immediately go liquid again. Like,
dude, this is literally so funny because then I got into a whole conversation with the same friend about that, and then we're literally just like going back and forth talking about the Figma IPO.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, the girl next to us is like, you guys are like starting a company, and I was like, no, we're just like talking about the Figma IPO. And I was like, the fact that our friend group is like so like,
I know.
like the fact that our friend group is so much that this chick thinks that we have our own company, but it's just us talking about shares of stock we don't own. Like we don't have these
stocks. Anyways, the one thing that has been talked about a lot with Figma going public is the fact that they made the choice to go public versus like Databricks, Stripe, and other really strong like tier 1 companies as staying private, because essentially they're like the pressure to go public is not as hard anymore, because when you think about an IPO, why does someone go public? It's because it's a funding round. Like you need to bring funding back into the company to go and grow that company. But then over time, it became a way for early investors, the founders, or the early employees to get liquid and to actually get the profits that they deserve. And that's how you got into the classic like 4-year vesting schedule when you joined a startup, because like the idea was that you would IPO within 4 years of starting the startup. And then what happened was secondaries became a thing. And so it became very easy to liquidate your shares in future rounds. And so now you're seeing Stripe raise like round I, J, K.
It's actually insane.
Because like they don't.
LMNOP.
Yeah. And like they're basically providing liquidation to their employees in all of those rounds. Like I think I even got liquidation, and I worked there for like 6 to 8 weeks. Like
You got liquidation of your shares?
like I was allowed to sell some of my shares.
Why did you even have shares?
Dude, anyways.
Dude, every time Maya tells the Stripe story, it gets
the Stripe
more
story is like
ridiculous.
insane.
And so
You were not even there the length of an internship. Why did you have shares?
and so but but yeah, so what it does though is that then you have essentially these tier 1 companies that are doing really, really well, stay private and just becoming this like bigger and bigger like company. You have a bunch of tier 2 companies go public because they actually do need to raise that money. And so then you're seeing like IPO crashes or whatever. But yeah, this is all to say that Figma is one of the first like tier 1 companies to go public in a really, really long time. And it's exciting because more people will feel, I don't know, excited to also go public. I'm not really sure.
I think it all relates back to our first story about like American, what does A16Z call their fund? American
Dynamism.
Yeah. That word's hard for me. But like when companies like Stripe and Databricks and all these companies like don't add to like the market, it's like a worse market. Because like that's like what makes the US market so good is like you have access to all the best companies in the world. But if companies stop going public, that won't be true. And like when you hear like the more like militaristic companies or even like the more America first companies like Anduril, Databricks like talk about IPOing, like I feel like they see it as a point of national pride. And I think like the America is so back mentality in tech, which is like really close to this current administration as well, will like push people to IPO.
Well, like Dylan Fields literally says, quote, "I like the idea of our community sharing in the ownership of Figma, and the best way to accomplish this is through the public markets." The second point that I wanted to make also along the lines of this is that like IPO markets tend to feed back into M&A and venture capitalist activity. So like I think there's like a lot of...
Did your friend tell you that?
Actually, no. X told me this. But what? I was going to say...
X.
Not
her X. X the app.
X the app.
Oh,
like Twitter, yeah. Well, because I was going to say that people are worried about A16Z drying up for their next funds because there's essentially like not many ways to get liquid right now because they're pumping a lot of money into like AI startups and then they're not seeing the returns on their previous funds.
Sorry, that's like not funny.
What's that?
No, I just started laughing at them not getting returns.
Well, I don't know how true it is because I have like I'm just like genuinely speaking out of my ass based off of like X threads. Like I have no clue. But if this is true, having a hot IPO landscape will help that problem and we'll start to see more people invest in AI. So if you're worried about the AI bubble popping, worry no more. Because like what we'll see is people will continue to invest over the next 2 years if they're able to get liquid from these previous investments going
I've
public.
started sending Priya things and saying this is a top signal. Like I saw 2 brown men dancing in Washington Square Park the other day and I just sent it to her and I was like, top signal.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's all I had.
That's all. That's
Adios,
all for today.
amigos.
Bye.
Bye.